I wanted to kind of just talk a little bit about your pedigree. I ran into a review I think on one of the sites, and it mentioned that moonshiners, and I was like, yeah, cool. And then you both worked with Beam, and so if you can go through maybe just some of the pedigree that you guys have in your whiskey experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're excited to be the first ones. That's for sure. That's for sure. And glad you like the samples. Yeah. So Rick and I, longtime high school buddies, right? And I think our pedigree starts with um, kind of a fun and a hobby, being high schoolers, causing a little mischief here and there, and having fun doing it. We grew up in the mid '90s in the craft beer boom, and we figured out they would sell you the equipment to make beer. So we were home brewers. Kind of started. Rick's just a tad older than me, even though I have more gray hair. But I was 15 when we started home brewing over at my house, and my dad would kind of help us here and there. And my folks were like, "I'm sure that beer tastes great, 15-year-old. Get out of here. Good for you for trying some science, I guess." But my folks were kind of okay with it. Happy to say I'm a sixth generation Coloradan. My four times great grandfather had one of the first liquor stores in Denver in like the 1850s and 60s. There's actually pictures of it in the Colorado History Museum, which is pretty cool. And then Grandpa on the other side of the family made bathtub gin on the East Coast during Prohibition. And so when we started brewing beer, it was kind of like, science fun. They're not causing too much trouble. It was kind of in the family history and the family blood, if you will. So that's kind of some of that pedigree. And then Rick and I went to different schools for undergrad, and then we reconnected at the University of Denver, where we were
Yeah,
taking
so yeah,
classes
so
at Daniels, and we Daniels Business School reconnected there, and that's where we started working for Jim Beam part time, and basically got paid to learn about whiskey, and then figured out like, oh, you boil beer to make whiskey? We've been making beer since high school. Let's buy a still and see what we can come up with.
yeah, so is that, I had a friend that I'd met out in the state of Washington where I did my undergraduate degree. He had gotten transferred out to Colorado to manage, on and off premise for the Beam catalogs. And he was kind of looking at a different model of hiring maybe guys who enjoyed whiskey more than people that are a little better looking to sell whiskey. And so we got trained by Fred No on the Bookers, Bakers, Basil Hayden, the kind of higher end of the portfolio. And that training from Fred No really kind of piqued that interest in that next step of the alchemy of taking grain to alcohol, right? So we had this homebrew background. Then we got trained and fell in love with, whiskey, and in particular rye whiskey. So, when it switched from being a home brewers to Owen bought the first still in 2010 and started moonshining rye whiskey in the garage, because we fell in love with that complexity of the rye grain and what that, imparted into the whiskey. So that's kind of how we made that jump from the home brewing to why we started home distilling. And then the uniqueness to all of our whiskeys, right, is one, all we do is whiskey, and two, all of our whiskeys are aged with aspen. And so the reason we started using Aspen Kin that first year in 2010, we got our still that Owen can kind of jump into about.
Nice, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, being a home distiller is fun. It's a great way to make friends with the neighbors pretty quick. Always stopping by slow on a Saturday to see what's going on. But essentially, we took a mason jar from the garage and took it up to my wife's family's got a cabin outside of Fairplay, Colorado, which is like south of Breckenridge ski area up there. It's an old cabin with lots of aspen trees around, so that's what the firewood is. So we were shutting down the cabin in the fall for the winter, having a good time, drinking around the fire. Had this mason jar of moonshine rye, threw a chunk of charred aspen from the fire in there, left it up there on a southern-facing windowsill all winter, so hot days, cool nights, got that aspen wood to work. Came back in the spring to open the cabin, had a sip of the mason jar, like, wow, this is really good. We like to say, moral of the story, drink by the fire with friends, right?
Nice.
So that was kind of the impetus of using aspen was kind of the Bob Ross happy accident up in Fairplay. um, and that's kind of led us down this Aspen finishing road.
Yeah. So that's why alcohol, why now whiskey, and why Aspen.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I think you just knocked out several of my questions. But yeah, like I put like my first little note is it says pedigree, chemist, mad scientist. What makes you think you can make whiskey? So a little bit of everything there, some background, some history, a little mad science, right? And yeah, so um, what is your goal when you guys produce whiskey? Like what is the goal for the maybe for the company? Or maybe even for just individual releases.
Yeah, no, I think Owen and I might have similar but slightly different, so he can answer for himself as well. But I think for me, it's not about creating a type or it's not about creating the whiskey. It's about introducing whiskey to people, right? Whiskey is this, at least it used to be this exclusionary club, right? If you weren't drinking your whiskey neat, if you weren't drinking it while smoking a cigar in a leather chair, you're drinking it wrong. And that's something that we disagree with. We think whiskey should be this exclusionary or this inclusive um, component to people's lives. So more importantly to what I'm trying to create around the whiskeys, it's more of trying to get people to open their minds to, especially at the beginning when all we made was one whiskey, it was a rye whiskey. And so when we were pouring samples, we had a lot of people coming up being like, you know what, I'm not a rye drinker, so I'm going to pass. And we're like, hey, give it a try. If you don't like it, we're not pushy salesmen, right? And so we got a lot of conversions because of what the Aspen would imparts into our whiskeys, both flavor wise and filtration components. But I think that's something that I really am proud of, and what I try to continue to emulate as we expand our portfolio is introducing more and more people to whiskey and potentially changing their minds about certain categories of whiskey, and certain kind of restraints that traditional um, mindset around whiskey has pervaded over the course of time.
Yeah, and to kind of continue that, the aha moment when people try the rye and they're like bracing for impact and like, oh, this is really good. Like there's a little moment of joy right there in finding something good, finding something, small, unique. So, we've said this before, but we're kind of peddlers of joy and whiskey's the vehicle, right? And when people come to the tasting, we wanna have a good time. We want them to leave with knowing something, learning something, having fun doing it. And I think that leads down to our products, right? And again, as Rick said, everything touches our Aspen discs and has a little bit of special in there. And I think on a small product level, it's fun to taste 4 or 5 different expressions because they're all really different, right? Not only is it a rye, it's a rye with aspen, right? It's a bourbon using rye-soaked aspen discs for our big catch bourbon. Our big blaze bourbon that you've had is that wildfire burnt aspen wood, right? So when people taste them, they taste very different, and I think that kind of educates and lights them up as well. And that's such a fun moment for us. But to kind of bring it back to a higher level, we think of Locke and Company. When we were growing up, we used to have company over for dinner, right? And we think about it as Locke in Colorado from where you are, Locke in community. So, we talk about the and co a lot, and that's kind of the basis for a lot of our decisions is does it fit the and company in the sense that, we start around this fire pit. How can we add more people to this fire pit, right? So creating and expanding that fire circle, that community really drives and is like the compass, our North Star for a lot of our decisions. And so I think that's super important when we look at what's going on out there is, we're a whiskey company. We don't do gins or vodkas or anything, not that we don't like them, but, it's just kind of this unique little Aspen whiskey thing. Let's start with one and see how this goes. And from there, we built out other expressions, other things, including, the big blaze with the community donation component in there built in. And again, how do we expand that campfire circle? So, you're officially part of the ANCO today now, Rob. We appreciate you. Yes. Pat yourself on the back a little bit. But, yeah, so that's kind of how it
Right to
works.
that.
Cheers, cheers. I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
yeah. So, I think, and that's it really goes back to when we started distilling, it wasn't that we saw craft distilling as something cool that we wanted to get into as far as an industry, right? We saw as a next step of, like I mentioned before, the alchemy of grain to alcohol. And so we were just making rye. We started making whiskey in the garage, and we started making rye whiskey because that's the whiskey that we enjoyed. And so we weren't starting distilling trying to start a company. And it was about 3 years into running the still in the garage that finally more and more friends kept asking for more of our jars of whiskey. And so we kind of turned to each other and like, should we give this a go? And so spent another 3 years, working on the core 90 proof aspen-aged rye recipe before, starting commercial production in January 2016. Again, all we do is whiskey, so we had to let it age. We didn't hit shelves till the very end of 2018. And when we came out on the market, we came out as a new Colorado distillery, and Colorado is very unique where we can self distribute. So we go into these stores and be like, hey, we're a new Colorado distillery. You can almost feel and sometimes see the eye roll of what vodka do you have for me to taste today? We're like, we don't have vodka. We have at the time it was just under a 3-year-old rye. Now our core is a 4.5-year-old rye. But they're like, wait, you're coming out with an aged whiskey and it's a rye? Why are you making rye? Bourbon's the largest category. It's like, we're just making things we enjoy and we're trying to share it with you, right? And so, as Owen said, how do we add people to our experiences? And that's why we have, the plus sign on our barrel heads. You see it highlighted on Owen's logo there, like all that plus sign on the bottle. How do we add people instead of keep people away from the whiskey world and sharing in it with us?
Sign on
Exactly.
the, yeah, I like
That's
that.
right.
Okay, awesome. That is great. Yeah. I guess my next question probably won't fit too well now because you guys kind of described the core philosophy and everything perfectly there. But yeah, I mean, obviously you're in Colorado, and when you look at Colorado and the whiskey products from Colorado, you see a lot of single malts, and so you kind of answered it, but why not single malt?
You mean why not yet?
Oh, breaking news, friends!
Breaking news. Slowly breaking news. Yeah, not yet. I think it's something we want to play with out there. Like you said, there is a lot of really good, American single malts in Colorado right now. And as we referenced, we're still pretty small as a company trying to go out there. So adding another large segment out there could be somewhat challenging. But it's definitely something we've thought about a lot for sure. But in our efforts to kind of connect and build people, we're doing a lot of like one-offs for individual companies or little groups, little communities. So that's kind of a nice way to try these different things in a smaller kind of segment. And for instance, we have an account that we just finished aging a bourbon with Japanese cherry wood, and so that was really fun. It's for Sushi Den and their restaurants out here. That Sakura wood adds a great color, a great little cherry note flavor to it. And so it's kind of fun to use that as let's make something really good for that account. And then from that learning, well, maybe we should expand that to other things and see how that plays and moves. And so I think it's the start of what's unique, what does the client want, what do we like, let's make that really good and then see how that plays out before just going headfirst into American single malts or other categories that are out there.
It's a great answer, and that fits everything that you've just been talking about, and the whole philosophy and how you built from where you're at, and makes complete sense. It's more of a jest, obviously. I mean, I don't. You probably can't see what's on my shelf, but there's no single malts up there. But I figured I'd throw that in there. Um, let's shift into, well, what makes you settle at a proof point? Like you talked about the core rye being at 90. Both the bourbons that I tasted were at 95. What gets you to that point? Why do you settle at those points?
I think there's a couple of factors that go into it. So our Big Catch bourbon, that was our first bourbon we ever produced. And why we started making rye is because we love the boldness of the rye and how that stands up to ice or vermouth or simple syrups or bitters. And so when we were making a bourbon, to be true to what we enjoyed, we wanted to bring some of our love of the complexity of rye to our big catch bourbon. And so part of that, to balance it is a 75% corn mash. So to balance the sweetness, which is what for our palates, what we feel gets lost in a lot of bourbons when you start adding ice or vermouths or bitters or ginger beers or whatever it is, that alcohol content can help that alcohol stand up to those other components, so you're still tasting it. The other piece specific to Big Catch is that we put in, as Owen mentioned briefly earlier, we take some of the rye soaked charred aspen when we're done aging our rye whiskeys and finish our bourbon with that to give it a little bit more of that robust depth. But specific to our first bourbon, the alcohol content was to help balance the sweetness. So that was a specific idea on that. For a lot of these other private barrels, and I'm sure Owen will speak more to this, but you kind of got to let the whiskey talk.
Yeah, and I think to Rick's point, you can't rush the barrels. They tell you when they're done, right? And so, we always start as a cast strength option, and we'll bring this to accounts to sample cast strength and add some water to see how it opens up. And what I think is pretty cool about our whiskeys is they change pretty dramatically with just a couple drops of water from the cast strength down. And we find some of that 95 proof, again, that higher alcohol holds up better in the cocktail. It also has, not a cast strength note, but almost cast strength-ish, where you get good concentrated, strong flavor out of there. It doesn't feel like you're wanting more for a lot of these. It feels full-bodied for a 95 proof, like some people guess it's over 100, right? So in some of those, it's what are we looking to make that we like out there, like our cast strength rye, we think is amazing. It highlights the filtration of the aspen for 123 to 132 proof. It's really damn smooth for that proof, right? And that shows that aspen wood, and we can see people, really relate to that. For these other ones, especially, since we're using some rye-soaked aspen and things in there, it's, maybe the account, or maybe we think we want it to be more approachable, right? So still strong flavors for sipping by itself and cocktails, but some people balk at the 130 proof bottles out there, right? So specifically with like Big Catch and Big Blaze, we knew that was going to go out to a lot of people, right? Big Catch is our flagship bourbon. Big Blaze is a one-off, creating dollars for Grand County Fire District 1. So what can we, what's more approachable but still has that strong flavor complexity that's out there? So there's a lot of components. To get technical, there's some filtration you have to do, a little extra if you're like under 92 proof or so, or it can do a little bit less filtration above there. So that's always helpful because we want to filter as minimally as possible, and most of our stuff is unfiltered. So those components and kind of creating something unique, I think Rick would be like, hey, Owen, let's drop the proof on some of these to make it even more approachable out there in the world. And so those are conversations we have, right? So we always say it's proof dependent, right? So how many bottles can we get from this barrel? It's proof dependent. So we joke about that, but there's a lot of factors. And is this a one-off? Is this going to a larger community? Do we have something related to it that needs to be a different proof to kind of show those differences and expressions? So you can get complex with it pretty good, and at some point you go, you know what, it's pretty good at this proof, right? Sometimes that's all you need as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I when I drink both of the Big Blaze and the Big Catch, in my notes it says drinks hotter than it actually is. And I think that the flavors definitely come out amazing, but it still has that proof. I drink neat, so but it's approachable, and I even took it with me to Ohio when I was visiting some of my family. Even shared it with a few people there, and same thing. Very approachable, amazing product. So thank you for that explanation. Let's see here. You guys mentioned a couple things. We were talking a little bit about the Big Catch, and did I read that correctly? Because in the materials you guys sent me, I believe it said it was a blend of a high rye and a high wheat mash bill. Is that correct?
So
Or is
it's
it
a four barrel blend, 75 corn, 21 wheat, 4 barley on 3 barrels. The fourth barrel, same 75 corn, 21 rye, 4 barley. So that's the blend of a 4 barrel blend of Big
If you
Catch.
break it down to 4 barrels, yeah.
right?
So
So
we'll blend those 4 barrels together, and then we add the fresh charred aspen, the rye soaked aspen to that. Let the aspen do its work, and then we bottle. But when we blend those barrels together, we blend them together in a big, tank. So they stop on that oak barrel, and then they get that aspen finish. Then they go to the bottle. We do have some other expressions. Some wine finishes would be like an oak barrel, 8 months with aspen, maybe another year in a port barrel, right? So sometimes the aspen's the middle component of that and not the final component of finishing on there, depending on some of those releases. But that's typically how it goes. But for that Big Catch, it's kind of 321 wheats, 121 rye, but there's extra rye notes from reusing those rye soaked aspen discs in there.
yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Okay. I'm surprised because I didn't really think it was a weeder, with that much wheat content. I did not. It is definitely unique. So, all right, hilarious question probably. Which came first, the fire or the idea of the bourbon?
The fire. Fire happened back in 2020.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I have family property up in Grand County. Luckily, we didn't lose the place. It came within a mile of our family place.
good.
And so, I mean, there's still, it's going on 7 years ago. I guess it'll be 6 years ago this October, is October 2020. And the fire scars are so prominent. It's brutal up there, how much devastation. It's still to this day the second largest wildfire in Colorado history. So the fire happened first, and then it was through our connections and talking with people up there, as well as at that point we had started doing these private releases for some ranches. And so just like everyone does these private releases, right? We do the same thing. We come up with a bunch of samples. They choose which barrel they like, but the aspen allows us to have this next level connection because we harvest aspen off their property, right? So not only are they choosing the barrel, but we have to plan about a year ahead because we have to cure and dry and then char the aspen, which takes about just over a year to get that properly cured before we can char it. So we're cutting aspen off these ranches' property. They're choosing their barrel, and then we're finishing with their aspen. So we had started this process of harvesting aspen from around different areas of Colorado for these limited releases or for these private releases. So when the fire happened, and through talking to Chief White, who's the fire chief of the Granby Fire Station, and the food and beverage director for the Winter Park Ski Resort, they had some friends that lost a lot to the fire, and they had aspen grows on their property. So it kind of between those two components of me having family property there, starting this process of harvesting aspen off of lands and doing these limited releases in our community kind of brought that together.
Yeah, so that's honestly a perfect example is what I was saying, right? We used one account to use their aspen, use it for that account, and then we said, how can we bring this to help raise more money, right, for the people impacted by the fire, right? So instead of just getting a single barrel exclusive release at Run Ranch, let's use that concept for this cool bourbon over here where we can reach more people, bring more people in Locke Co. and raise more money, right? So that's a perfect example of like, all right, we tried something over here that worked really well. How can we, grow that as a limited release function out there for our product?
Fantastic. Yeah. And I meant no insensitive feelings behind that. As soon as it came out of my mouth, which came first, because it's kind of funny when I sit there and think about it, but like you're personally affected by it, and so I hope you didn't take any insensitive
Wow.
emotion from that from me. So sorry. Some of my employees tell me I'm very highly high emotional intelligence kind of person, and so as soon as I said, I was like, oh, did I just put my foot in my mouth?
Not at all. It's no, we didn't. It wasn't taken that way, and
Oh, good.
it's really cool to be able to take something that caused so much damage and be able to get back to the people that helped it from being even more damaged. Damaging more property and taking more
And
lives.
And I would add on, we get asked all the time, well, are you going to run out of some of that aspen wood from that fire? And it's like, yes, but there's, multiple fires burning right now in Colorado
Oh
that
wow.
could use our help, and other aspen, that we could harvest for other fires and other communities impacted. So our goal would be never to use that again, right? We don't want these fires, but unfortunately, we got an ample supply. So as this grows and develops, it could be for a different fire or a different community, other people who are impacted that we could use whiskey for good.
It's touching. It really is. I remember seeing the advert for it, and just I was just like, wow, that's why I drink whiskey. I love the stories, the just that I don't want to cry, so I'm not gonna I'm gonna cut and stop because and I hope I hope you can continue to do what you're doing, and with other fires, you do the same thing, another batch, and hopefully they're at one point. You guys can probably look back, and that could be a legacy thing where you can look back and say we kind of helped end forest fires by providing that monies to the fire departments to do the assessments and the different protection mitigation stuff that they can do. So hats off, guys. I like that's awesome. Okay, let me wipe my tear. All right. So you talked a little about the single barrel rye. And I noticed your single bar rye just won double platinum with the Ascots. So first off, congratulations. And then secondly, why didn't I get a sample of that?
We'll have to remedy that problem. We'll have to remedy that problem. But yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, we're very excited, and that single barrel rye was our second product, right? So we had the 90 proof rye to kind of come out and start with, and once people tasted the aspen finish on there, they were looking for that cast strength option. So uncut, unfiltered, we say it's as close as we can get to sticking your head under the barrel. There's little flecks of char from the barrel still in the bottle. Typically 123 to 132 proof, somewhere in there on our single barrels. What's unique is some of our, we've started with like 30-gallon oak barrels, char levels 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we blend those together for our 90 proof product. We've selected certain ones for single barrels, but it could be a char 3, a char 4, or a char 5. So they're all a little different with that barrel char on there, which is great and adds some uniqueness to those single barrels. But they're all super smooth, and I think that's the thing is if you're a cast strength drinker, we like to play guess the proof when we pour this one. Pour a sample and be like, it's like 110, 115. We're like, yeah, 128. And they're like, oh, wow, that's super cool.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
we got our single barrels out maybe 5 years ago now was our first single barrel that hit the market. And I've been doing it ever since. As I tell, when we're pouring them, I'm like, if you can guess the proof, I'll give you the bottle. I've given away one bottle. Like, like again, they're drinking our for the single barrel rye specifically. They're the lowest I've seen is 126. The highest I've seen is 134. Most people, as Owen said, they're guessing 110, 115, right? Because that goes to how we cut the aspen. So not only do we use aspen, but after we took that log out of the fire pit and aged it in our jar of whiskey, we found out we loved the unique cinnamons and light brown sugars that came out of the charred aspen logs. We started realizing because aspen's such a soft, it's a very porous wood, we knew we could never make a barrel out of that wood. So knowing we always had to put those chunks of aspen into our whiskey, we started thinking instead of cutting it like how we chop firewood or how you make those barrel staves, right? That long cut, is if we cross cut them into discs where you can actually see the rings of the tree, that way the whiskey actually interacts with the natural cell structure of the tree. The trees are designed to pull nutrients from the soil up the trunk to the leaves and back down. They're through the xylem and the phloem cells. So cutting them into discs, they can move with the cells versus in a stave, they're trying to go against those cellular walls. So going in and out of the discs easier heightens that third thing that wood does, right? Wood does three things: color, flavor, and filtration. So those discs are really effective filters, which as Owen referenced before is highly indicative or is very, very, it's illustrated through our cast strength rye whiskey or cast strength any whiskeys that discs smooth out our whiskey and why I've only had to give away one bottle with the guess the proof game.
Wow. I should have got a science book out. You guys, I love the chemistry and the science behind everything. Like,
Well, we say if they would have taught us this in high school and college chemistry, I might have paid a little bit more attention. But we've had to go back and relearn some of this stuff.
well, I mean, Owen started at 15.
I had to go back and relearn it.
I'm a slow learner. I'm a slow learner.
Okay, so why is the rye aged in shorter barrels and the bourbon's aged in larger barrels? Do I have that correct?
That's totally correct. So when we started with the rise, we thought of, layering flavors with those different char levels. And the 30-gallon barrels that we get from the barrel mill out of Minnesota provide those. And the ratio to whiskey wood is different, right? And we like to say, like, people will be like, oh, you're just trying to age it faster. And I'm like, I don't have a time machine. We can't change time. What we can change is the ratio to wood to whiskey, right? And so, and I think that was part of a strategic of like, we were going to have to educate people about aspen trees and how we cut them and how they interact with the wood, and educate that, just because it's a smaller barrel doesn't mean we're trying to cut corners or advance time somehow. Like, this is just a unique way to go towards whiskey. This isn't something that you find from a historic whiskey house or anything like that. This is something that's different. And I think that struck us personally is because we were small. And so we wanted something that was unique, that highlighted that aspen wood, but how could we layer these flavors differently? So smaller barrels and unique char levels were how we wanted to go about that. So it was kind of, how can we be different at the start, but also kind of true to what we've been doing in the garage and who we are. And that was kind of the impetus for that. Now,
And how we can make rye more approachable, right? Like those layered flavors helped soften that rye, and cutting the aspen differently helped soften the rye. Actually, the cutting the disc softened or sweetened it too much. Our original rye was an 80% rye mash bill. We had golden oats in that original mash bill, and once we switched to those discs, the flavor is so much more pronounced. Part of the 6 years of developing that core rye recipe was raising the rye mash bill, changing some of the rye grains, ryes, different sweeter grains, sweeter ryes we changed, and the golden oats that we got rid of. And so again, it's trying to bring more people into not only whiskey, but into rye. And that helps. It makes it a more approachable rye.
Yeah, and I think that's a key point, Rick, is, we had to learn as we go on this, right? People will say, like, the first time they run the still was the best white dog they've ever had in the world. Not with us. We scorched it. We didn't filter the grain enough. It was bad time. So kind of how to learn to do this. And part of the learning was you can't buy charred aspen off the market like you can buy a barrel, right? So on the family property or at some of these, ranch partners that we work with, we cut those aspen trees, we'll cure them, 12 months, the wind, the rain, the snow, sun, flip them over. The bark has bitter notes, we'll sand off the bark, and then we char them on the Weber grill by hand, about a char level 2 or 3 maybe in there, and then they float in the whiskey. We use vegetable-based bar and chain oil on the chainsaw, so no petrol gets on there, right? So we're kind of like this mini little aspen cooperage that had to learn that science. Up at the property in Fairplay, there's a pile of discs that we had cured, but then we had a big rainy season and they got moldy, so they didn't make the cut, so now they're firewood. So all these learnings about, it might not work the first time through, but as we kind of walk our path down this, we'll figure out the way to make this work. And I think that's the value of patience. And Rick, I think you'd agree, we found a lot of value in inefficiencies there, right? So it wasn't efficient the first time, but as we worked and got through it in there, and that value and inefficiency, we found throughout Locke Co. When we first were self-distributing, we got to meet everyone because we were delivering the bottles, right? And so we got to share our stories. It took a long time, and it's kind of like a donut maybe. The first 3 are good, the next 3 are not as good. The law of diminishing returns there. But at the start, and I would suggest that for anyone looking to start, is anything like that inefficiency, the extra time, how do you really look through this and willing to take a risk and make mistakes so that you can learn, there's extreme value in that. And I think that's something that we always kind of represented is it's going to take a long time to do. And people ask us, well, which one's your favorite? It's normally the one that we just bottled because it takes so long to get to the bottle. Or my answer is, what emotion am I feeling today? Do I need the cast strength or something lighter, right? So, but kind of that process of how to cure this aspen wood was something we had to find out. And now we have a lot of expertise in it, and that led to other finishes and other woods, like that cherry wood that we're talking about. So the stumblings with the aspen got the aspen great, but now our expertise into these other finishes that we can offer to other people.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you guys are definitely on to something with the finishing. That cherry wood even sounds like it, I could just imagine that the softening that the aspen is doing to the whiskey is going to have some very pronounced flavors with the cherry wood. So, wow. Let's see here. What is the biggest hurdle to Locke and Company growth?
Hmm. It's a solid question there, Rob.
It's a good question. I think
I may be a rookie at this, but
no, it's good. So I would say one thing that's unique about us is the only still we own is the one we started in the garage with. And so we use other distilleries in Colorado, rye's out of Colorado Springs, bourbon's out of Lakewood, Colorado. So everything we do is, we're paying for storage, using the bottling lines. We bottled, like 900 bottles of a bourbon for a local company on Tuesday or Monday this week. So we're there all the time, putting the labels on, doing it. We just don't own those facilities, right? As a 30-person team, we looked at it as we didn't want to start a vodka and gin, kind of day one to start cash flowing. We wanted to focus on that aspen-aged whiskey product. So I think that's it's a great thing because that allows us to go out and do tastings and events a lot more than other people. But we don't have like a central location where you can come find us every day. And so I think part of that awareness and community outreach is something that we'd love to grow into as we keep continuing. So that's a challenge with people like, I just want to come see you at the place and here. And I'm like, well, we can schedule it in 2 weeks when we're there. Other than that, come find us at all these other tasting events. So I think that's, a hurdle for us. And then just being such a small scale, when our rye, 90 proof rye first won gold at San Francisco World Spirits, it actually won 3 years in a row. And they called and they were like, you're one of the smallest suppliers to do this. You're not a micro distillery, you're a nano distillery. And we said, sweet, awesome. What's a nano distillery? Their reference is under 100 barrels released a year. And our first batch was 32, 64. We're pretty much still under 100 barrels released a year. So inherently, because we're a small company, using other facilities, people see us around in Colorado, but maybe not have tried us. And so again, using those events to do that, but then how do we look at let's, work really well in Colorado, make this kind of our core market because that's where we are and we can impact it. But as we look to other states and other markets, how do we grow and do that? And part of that is getting online and doing PR with you and people like that so we can share the story in other ways so they hear about us. They can go online and order bottles, but obviously we'd love to be at their neighborhood store as well. So those are the challenges of kind of finding the right partners and the right avenues to tell that story in a great way that's just not a one-off market. If we go to a market, we want to be there and create relationships. And I think back to the inefficiencies, this is still whiskey. You still want to hold a bottle. You still want to see it. You still want to hear that story. It's kind of an old school business in that sense. And something that Rick and I really love is creating those relationships. Again, that's what the whiskey is the vehicle for, creating that joy, that connectivity between people and community. And you can't rush that to a certain extent, right? You kind of have to slowly go and grow that in the right way. And so for us, I think is being so small, how do we create brand awareness in these different markets so that we could go into these markets and create that story and those relationships in the right way, not just a one-off flash in the pan.
Great answer. Rick, you got anything you want to add to that, or?
I would say right now our biggest hurdle is time. Whiskey takes time. There's only three of us. We only have so much time between the three of us. There's only so many hours in the day, and we have everything to do. Everything from cutting the aspen to charring the aspen to mixing the barrels to tasting the proof to labeling to doing events. It's time. I think right now, and it's something that someone said to us. Gosh, it's crazy to say. We've been on the shelves now almost what that's seven, coming up on 8 years. That I have to remind myself that these are the good old days. Hopefully, at some point, we'll be, in a different position and be like, remember when we were just actively distributed in Colorado? Remember when we were just worried about this? But that's I think the biggest challenge being time is because whiskey takes a long time to make and to finish with the aging, right? The magic of whiskey, that time component. How do we grow, to Owen's points earlier? How do we grow in a responsible, strategic manner? Because the last thing we want is to dip our toe into a market and it be incredibly successful because we can't just flip a switch and make more and get more out there, right? Like we can't do that. And we don't want to hurt the accounts that have been supporting us, since we hit the shelves in September of 2018, and be like, you know what, you can only get 6 bottles. We're a strictly allocated whiskey now because we have to support all these other markets. Like we want to make sure we're supporting the people that supported us. And so how do we grow strategically with a product that takes so much time and effort and those inefficiencies at this moment? So, that'd be my answer for this moment in my life.
It's great. Yeah, no, those are really good answers. Thank you, guys. All right, so we know 17 million barrels are aging in Kentucky right now, right? Is Colorado as taxing on storage as Kentucky?
So, the legalities and the tax, we have excise tax, federal tax, state tax, all that fun stuff. Since we're so small, that impact isn't as big as, 40,000 barrels to less than 100 barrels, right? So it's a different scale to kind of work with that way. So we're not as impacted on sitting on something. We tend to not sit on a bunch of product or barrels, right? So that's just kind of the nature of being who we are. But I think one of the things that's really unique about Colorado, this is a little sidebar, is the climate they're stored in, right? So, the hot days, cool nights is way different than just hot days in Texas or just cool nights in Canada or lower elevation in Scotland that could add moisture into those barrels. So when I think like barrels differences between Kentucky and Colorado, I think maturation differences, because the tax part, we're just such a different ball game between the big boys out there. But that does impact the market, right? So how do they get rid of those barrels? How do they create new products? And how do we fit into that mix of the overall whiskey world is more of how that impacts us rather than taxation dollars or anything like that.
So follow up. Is there any strategy that you have to implement that is dependent because of taxation or other laws that affects how and what you produce?
So I don't know if it's a tax decision, but there are barriers to new markets, right? Certain markets are control states, different states. We thought we were going to be able to, drive product to Wyoming to pour samples and get a little skiing and fishing in, but you legally need someone as a resident of Wyoming to pour a sample, right? So some of those strategies of what's the control state bottle pricing look like compared to Colorado, which is more open pricing and we can create case deals and things like that. I think that's more impactful on the markets and the strategies that we have out there than the tax at this point, just again being so small. But those would be impediments to us to get into states. Sometimes there's you have to, a law firm in Texas you have to pay for on a yearly fee to do that. How much is that fee relative to a different state? All those little like impacts on entering a market play a part on how easy it is to get in there, and that can affect dollars and times, especially if it's a, hey, we got two or three accounts in a new market that want to carry us. Would that, allow us to pay these fees in order to do so? And is it just a one-off, or is it a long-term play for us? How do we build those relationships? So I think, the legal structure of each state offers its own challenges to a certain extent, and that's the strategy that we have to kind of navigate and play so that we could travel to those markets and help impact and support those. It's just a little different for every state. So that nuance is more a determination for us of where to go than a strict tax basis. It's all these other little things of like, how do you actually get a sales team in this new market, and how can we do that with the pricing that needs to be and the freight costs from across the country, things like that that are kind of a little bit smaller on the scale that add up to a big strategy decision.
Good answer. Good answer. You
Are
sure
we
you don't have a
acing the
business
quiz
degree?
so far?
Yeah, yeah,
Excellent. I'll take it.
absolutely. All right. Well, the next one was just what does distribution look like? Obviously, but I had a note. I don't know how many content creators you guys follow. Thank you for following me and liking some of my stuff. I really appreciate that. But I literally I watched a Bruzel video recently. Did you see he was hunting in Colorado? And I saw a shop owner was talking about the Big Blaze bourbon and was telling the whole story. And I about cried when TJ didn't get a bottle of that. Like seriously, like because I was still waiting to get the bottles from you guys. And so obviously, I mean, I think you kind of already answered it, but because this distribution is basically you guys can openly distribute. You can just go and sell it basically to a distributor that goes to shops, or how does that work in Colorado?
Yeah, so Colorado is very unique, and that's why you see craft brewing, why you see craft distilling, even craft wineries, why you see a lot of them start in Colorado is most states have the three-tiered system, right? You have distribution, you have sales, and you have production. And if you do any one of those, you can't do the other two. Colorado, you can do all three of them.
Hmm.
So that's how we started, right? We would go around, get orders, and go fulfill those orders. Now we have a distribution company, so we hire a distribution company to go call on all these accounts that sometimes they foster and developed. A lot of them, like they had carried us before, so the primary drivers or the primary order fulfillers are distribution company, but we still have our license that we can fulfill orders in the case that the distribution company doesn't go to that territory or can't get there or something happens. We can still fulfill those orders, but it's changed over the course of the since 2018, right? Is that now our primary purpose or our primary job in the market is connecting, getting new placements, cocktail menu placements, and doing events to help support pull through versus trying to get those new orders. I mean, we still do that for a lot, right? Like to hand off to our distribution company. Um, but it's not us doing all the deliveries, which is huge, right? That we just don't have that time to go get the order, pitch it, try to get the initial order, and then fulfill that order and any subsequent, following orders, right? So we don't have that time commitment anymore, with the exception of helping one-offs, right? Where they didn't make the order came in after the truck, and we go to the distribution company. It's called a will call order. We'll pick it up from the warehouse and bring it up with the invoice to the account that we're going to do an event at, for instance. So that's how it operates here in Colorado, and how we're now currently operating is now using a distribution company to support us. And that's, for us, we use a mid-tier distribution company. It's called Classic Beverage Company. They're a Colorado founded company, originally started with wines only, and have hence spread out to craft, spirits and craft beers and craft wines. And so, we would get lost in the large distribution houses, right? I mean, these distribution reps, they're trying to make ends meet, and they're trying to, get paid the way they could get paid and maximize their efforts. And, when they have a portfolio that's this thick, and we're a half a page in that portfolio. We're not big enough to get the time commitment that we do get out of a mid-tier distribution company. And that's what Owen kind of referenced with looking in these other states is we can't just be like, all right, we're going to go into this state and go. We have to find the right relationship, or else it's going to fall on its face and not do what we want, because we can't compete with some of these other companies and the incentives that they drive through the reps, sales quotas and stuff like that. We just can't compete with that. Right. We can compete with our time being in the market and supporting the brand. And, our time is the biggest, our biggest asset, right? Because we still, right now, we have more time than we have dollars. So.
This is what I got. This is kind of the wrapping up part. Obviously, I don't want to take all your guys' time. Oh, wow, we've been on it for almost an hour. Um, I wanted to do a little hot topic speed round. You guys ready?
Ready.
All right. What do you think of Uncle Nearest CEO getting fired?
No comment.
Okay.
Cut these out. You guys,
I just think the whole thing's it's a hard story to hear and like a hard lesson of going too fast, right? Too big, too fast, right? And I think that's the lesson to learn from that. But you never want to see anybody in that happen, right? That's a bad spot to be in. Whoever's involved. So, and it's good stuff, right? So we don't like that, but yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough situation.
you think that brand will be able to survive?
I think so. I think there's some brand equity out there, and they have some great products out there. I think they'll have to maybe approach the relaunch, if you will, a different way and kind of go slower, right, to build those relationships that we just referenced. I think that's too big, too fast. You think you can do no wrong, and I think that caught up in some way. So I think that would be what someone who's got experience kind of with that larger scale could buy that brand and build it in a slower way up and out again. But still, sought after and great products. So if you don't lose that, I think it's possible for sure.
Well,
I,
who's the
I
next
stole
CEO?
that one.
Oh, that's fine. Well, and I saw Rick was you almost jumped at that one too. So I wanted to give you a second, but he didn't say anything. So all right, who's
Owen
the next
covered it
CEO?
well.
Who's the next CEO of Brown Foreman?
Uh, Rick Talley.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Good question. Good question. I'm not sure. Probably someone with RTD experience. So that's the hot driver and someone who's maybe done a European market for that, something else that's different to kind of share that experience that seems to be their foundation going forward.
I like that. All right. Uh, all right. I don't know. Obviously, I think you guys are whiskey enthusiasts yourself. Why did Sazerac change the early times formula?
That's another good question. Efficiencies in their distillery.
That's a wonderful answer, Owen. I will second that.
Oh
Yeah,
man,
I see what you're
I
doing, Rob. I see what you're doing.
I
Yeah,
have literally I've literally seen a shop selling early times 1 liters, the blue cat for $69.99,
That's
and
crazy.
I was like, I can go to Total Wine and get this for $20.
That's crazy.
But yeah. All right, next one. What do you think about spirit sales going back to Canada? There's been some recent legislation that's been entered into I believe, the House, that is going to open formal inquiries of Canada's blockade of American spirits. What do you think about that?
I think we need to, as a country, overcome that, right? Like, I think that needs to happen. Just trade in general. to not only, our neighbors to the north, but across the globe. Like we need global commerce. We need global economies we need economies globally to be interacting. And regardless if it's spirits or not, we need those relationships. Us specifically, we're not affected by that as far as our microcosm of us being a nano distillery, but we're part of the liquor and the whiskey and the liquor industry as a whole. And what's good for the industry is good for us. And so I would like to see that come back for sure. It's unfortunate it's been going on for so long. The reasons behind it are complex at best. But it would be great if that came back.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And, that could be supply chain bottles coming to us and whiskey going other places. All of that makes it harder for someone like us to enter, right?
Yeah.
Something cool and unique that a lot of people would enjoy. It's just really hard, more expense up front, less opportunity to sell on the back end. So I think, any way we can open that up, specifically, people are drinking differently, drinking less alcohol. The behavior seems to be buying lesses of like the 10 pack of cookies and spending that same money on the one good chocolate chip cookie. And so we kind of fit that mold a little bit. But having more people looking for that would be great for us and help everybody else out there as well.
So, yeah. All right. Last one. Are you looking for any dedicated quality control specialist to taste your whiskey? Asking for a friend.
Always, always. You can always use another palate, another opinion, and I think that's what's so fun is when we do these events and they're tasting. We have a collaboration with the University of Denver as alumni where we have like a bourbon barrel we gave to a local honey maker and filled back up with bourbon, and it's got this hint of honey. That bottle also gives back to the university. But that one is, it's unique. People are like, oh, I like honey. Oh, I don't like honey. So everyone's got a unique palate, depending on what you ate, how you grew up, all those different factors, genetics in there. So having more palates, more ideas. And again, that's why we try to make things pretty different between expressions so that somebody finds something that they like with the Aspenwood, right? So I think that's pretty cool. So we're always looking for help is the answer.
We're always looking for help as long as as they follow what we say is we take all feedback. We just needs to be honest feedback.
Yeah,
We
So,
really want honest feedback. That's what our friends gave us. Sometimes a little harder feedback than we wanted to hear, but sometimes that's the most valuable feedback, right?
totally.
Um, and some of the hardest critiques at the beginning are the ones that now one of them works for us. He told us we shouldn't start a distillery, and now he's our director of sales. So
wow. That's crazy. All right. Well, gentlemen, I don't want to control all your time this afternoon. It's all evening for me. Really enjoyed this chance to talk to you guys and to, even these samples here. Any closing thoughts you would like to give to my audience that I can share?
I think my closing remarks or closing thought would be, try to take those blinders off, or at least open them up a little bit more. And it's something when I'm pitching, especially our rye whiskeys, to people who say they're bourbon drinkers and they don't like rye. Um, Maybe you just haven't had the right rye. And I try to remember that for myself when I say I don't like X. Maybe I just haven't had the right whatever that is up until this point. And so, if we can all open those blinders a little bit more and take that taste, you never know what that's going to open up for you and where it's going to bring you. So I think, coming into things, and I try to remember this in every day and every interaction of my life, but coming in with less expectations will only help me.
Yeah, I think closing thoughts would be, and I think Rick and I say this all the time, is like we make whiskey. We're not doing this and having fun. We're doing it wrong, right? Like have fun with what you're doing. It's just supposed to be fun. Whiskey's fun time. We like whiskey because it's cool, but more because of the times you've had with people. Your dad who passed away, your buddies who you started bottle pours on the porch with, a great cocktail when you propose to your wife. All that counts in the fun category of whiskey. Whiskey should be fun. And part of that would be, open the bottle. If you buy 3 bottles of a single barrel you like, open 2 of them because your friends will come over and they'll say, "Oh, that's open. I want to try that." It helps share the story, helps share what you found that you thought was cool. That sharing, we like to say in Colorado, there's no friends on a powder day skiing, but Rick and I grew up enjoying sharing those experiences. That's the core memory, is giving the high five over the whiskey, the great fishing day, the ski day, whatever that is. If you share it, it's going to be a big memory. And so open those bottles and have fun. This is supposed to be fun.
Yeah, and just don't be convinced that there's no wrong way to drink whiskey. Enjoy it the way enjoy it, right? If someone's telling you you're drinking your whiskey wrong because you mix it with whatever, that's something they have going on inside of that, right? Enjoy it the way you want to enjoy it. And that's something we learned from Fred No.
Totally.
So yeah. Well, guys, thank you so much. Again, I could keep you here for a lot longer. My wife and kids gave me some a gracious amount of time. They've actually been locked in their rooms, so I should probably let them out. It's 6 o'clock for us, so it's dinner time here. Again, really really great stuff you guys are producing. I can't wait to get the bottles that I already purchased. They're going to be staples on my shelf for certain. So. Please do let me know when you release new stuff. I'm totally going to be one of the first ones in line. Keep telling the great stories because that's what this world needs. The world needs good stories, and I think that you guys have a great vehicle with this whiskey. And I will be honest. When I first tasted the rye, I wasn't a big fan. My notes is that it was too low proof, and I literally wrote in my notes. I said it probably would be fantastic as a single barrel, and then a week later you win a double platinum mascot. So I could be a prophet. I don't know. I'm just saying, guys.
I love it.
But but seriously, again, I could keep you forever. You guys are wonderful, beautiful people. Love your story, love your company, love your product. So. Anything I can ever do to assist. If you want someone to pour whiskey in Indianapolis, just give me a call. All right.
I love
You
it.
reach your Rob.
I'll be
Appreciate your
there. All right. So again, thank you guys. Bless you. Have a wonderful evening. Enjoy this because I know I personally enjoyed this time. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, good chatting with you, Rob. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rob. Cheers.
Cheers, gentlemen.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.